Hey everyone, thanks for being early. We're going to give it a few more minutes here before we start, just to let the room fill up and then get going on today's topic of shade swap. So again, thanks for being early, and we'll give it a few more minutes. Hey Carter, welcome. I'll invite you to speak here. Let me know when you're up.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Gotcha.
We ready to leak the alpha of all alphas today?
Yeah, for some reason I'm upset. For some reason it's not playing music like normal. So normally it plays music in the beginning of spaces, but for some reason it didn't want to play.
I'd like to picture it as Elon wakes up like he has like a watch on and it senses his mood. And if he's in a bad mood, then the Twitter Spaces don't get music for the day.
No Twitter Spaces. Oh man, I would say it is probably the buggiest part of Twitter. I won't lie, is the Twitter Spaces, and they either crashing or things not working. But they still, for the most part, work, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, considering the popularity of it as a tool, you'd expect it to improve. We'll see where Twitter Spaces are at in 2025. Maybe by then we'll be able to have like videos live streamed with it.
That would be super nice. I need to spend a little bit more time on the Twitter Space side, but apparently you can upload like a banner and you can upload like a custom links and things and images like that. But I still need to figure out how to do that.
Very cool.
We'll get there one day.
Happy day off, but not day off because we schedule things.
Happy holiday for the people in the U.S. specifically on work. But yeah, it happens like that.
Did we link this sucker in Telegram?
Yeah, I was about to share that everywhere, so we gotta.
This is gonna be a good one today for anyone here early. Obviously, we want to give a rundown of where we stand with Shade Swap, Shade Lend, Silk. Some of the absurd innovation that's coming on the derivative side that we've just kind of confirmed. So excited to share some numbers and benchmarks tied to performance and the significance of it. And yeah, it's just going to be a really exciting Twitter space overall, just to give the community an update on the derivative swap and the stable swap.
Yeah, I think we'll give it a few more minutes here, probably till 11:05 or 11:06, and then we can get rolling. I am currently just sending announcements out about the Twitter space.
This year is already going way too fast. It's like January 16th. It's weird when you're a builder where like you want things to slow down, right? Things speed up. Oh man.
Yeah,
I mean, you want a bit of both. You want things to happen, but it's just weird to see the days like tick by as fast as they do.
yeah, it's an odd feeling of when you're constantly building things and you have your head down, and then you look up and you're like, oh, it is January 16th, and it's almost January's almost done.
Yeah.
But copy link. All right. Well,
The other Twitter space feature I wish there was is whenever you listen to a recording, you always like fast forward to the first 4 minutes because it's just the host chattering while they spread things out. You should be able to like choose when the recording starts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Be way more
you
professional.
can host the space and have everything live, but then you know that the recording starts at 11:05. Yeah.
Yep. It'd be a super simple feature too. Would not be that difficult.
Yeah.
Hey, we got Secret Taz in the
Welcome.
space. Legendary.
Oh, we had a.
Let the record show Taz had the best Secret Network memes back. Well, not really memes. Do like these tweet threads and these infographics. It was pretty spicy stuff. When is Taz gonna make a comeback on Twitter? That's what I'm waiting for.
The Purple Heart. Nice.
A Ghost here too. One of my favorite Shade Maxis.
True. Oh, welcome, Chad Thoreau. I follow you on Twitter personally. I enjoy the things that you tweet.
Cantero, StableSwap master himself.
There's about 40 people coming, according to Twitter. So hopefully people keep rolling in. But let's give it 2 more minutes here of Carter and I aimlessly chattering, and then we can start the space.
Yeah, I think we can kick off with the updates on Shade Swap and Shade Lend because I'm sure people are going to be chomping at the bit on that, and then we can shift the conversation over to the derivative swap, the stable swap. And I'm going to be pulling up the list here of pairs and whatnot, just in case any questions come up. We can leak alpha, right?
I was assuming we were going to. So
yeah, I mean, I think at this point we've already teased like a lot of the pairs, so maybe we can verbally share on here, and then if people want to leak it on Twitter, that's their prerogative.
Yeah, if people create threads, post this Twitter space, that would be their own doing, you know. But I don't know if there's anything better than coffee in the morning, and being just on your couch and enjoying yourself.
Coffee and crypto is pretty on Twitter Spaces all together, all at once.
Yeah, well, that's what we should have named into the interchain. To be honest, we should have named it Coffee and Crypto.
Coffee and crypto.
Yeah,
I feel like we would have attracted more individuals. They would have understood the vibe sooner.
Yeah, probably. Can we TM that? Is there a way that we can state that is now Carter and I's podcast per week?
Coffee and crypto. I'm actually going to Google that right now. I feel like coffee and crypto. If that's not taken, I'm spinning that channel up right now.
It's gotta be spun up. There's no way.
Coffee and crypto. Let's see here. Yes, it exists, and said individual has 26.9K subscribers. So. It looks like he has a video covering Pulse Chain, so that's unfortunate.
So we could do it, but also just have better content. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, enough of the ideas and copying people that already exist. I would say let's start this. So welcome, guys. We are going to be talking about Shade Swap, how it can be both a derivative swap plus a stable swap today. We're also going to be talking about pairings on the DEX and what that will entail for users. But I am Daltz. Carter is with me today, lead researcher of Shade Protocol. But Carter, if you want to get into it, let's give a brief update on Shade Swap, where it's at, and then Shade Lend as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in terms of timeline, we launched the Shade Bridge on December 28th. It was actually during the holiday season, so it was one of the most, impressive and smooth launches, considering we had half the team away. After that launch, the team came back the first week of January on essentially January 3rd, and we immediately began deep diving the user testing on ShadeSwap, as well as incorporating feedback from our auditors. Audit wise, we are essentially final report is, I believe, complete, and it's just the final remediations tied to those final tweaks from the auditor. So that's been a very intensive multi-month cycle. The audits actually started in November, so we're talking 2.5 months of auditing. It was very thorough, very expensive, not gonna lie, but obviously security first. But now that the smart contracts are locked and loaded, we're able to test all the key user stories. Like right now, I have our testnet up right now on the swap page, on the pools page, on the dashboard, and functionally speaking, 90% of the key user stories are good to go, and now it's just UI tweaks so that when people roll up for the first time, they're impressed. It matches the Shade brand. Everything's cohesive throughout the entire app. Swap technically would be launchable next week. You could hit the launch button. And by next week, I mean this week. We could have chosen to launch it this week, but we prioritize making sure that the UI is seamless and all the user stories are fully covered. Some really interesting features that I'm really proud of on Swap, I think not a lot of people know about, is we actually have single-sided liquidity providing a part of the app from day one. And I think it's incredibly well done in the user experience. Most DEXs to date hide single-sided liquidity providing really deep into the user story. But when liquidity providers roll up on this app or users, it's going to be very obvious and very simple that, hey, you don't technically need 50-50 of both the assets. We can handle all of that for you. And some of our final tweaks on UI UX has been tied to making sure single-sided liquidity providing is in a good place. But yeah, quite literally on testnet, we're pumped. We're doing final verification on StableSwap amounts. That's the other, besides UI, we want to make sure that the smart contracts are matching the router on the DEX, are matching what the math says on spreadsheets. So kind of doing a final formal verification that behaviors from front end API, smart contract, spreadsheets are all in line with each other, that nothing's out of place. Because what we don't want is someone to roll up on the StableSwap on day one, make a large trade, and see a mismatch between, what they told they were going to get through the router versus what they actually got. So seeing really good verification work this week primarily, and probably start of next week is really the final piece of the puzzle, is that amount verification on swaps. So overall, we probably will be sharing this endpoint with some community members very soon, maybe even in the public Discord. So be sure to join the Shade Protocol Discord, check out the testing channel, because we'll probably be opening up this endpoint in the not too distant future once we're in a fully finalized spot, just for final eyes on the product. Now on the Lend side, Lend's really interesting because the smart contracts for Lend have actually always been further along than the smart contracts for Swap. So I am also pulled up on an endpoint here. We got the vaults page, borrow page, the repay page, earn page, and the redeem page. So Lend is also completely functional on testnet right now. The smart contracts were actually ready and audited and complete before ShadeSwap. So you can expect the turnaround time from ShadeSwap to ShadeLend to be quite short. But in the full transparency of that, in that statement, there's at least 2 pages on the app that are going to have to see a UI overhaul just to make sure that it's a good user experience. So while smart contracts are locked and loaded on Lend, Silk is ready to go, audit is done, pages are here, we want to make sure that we deliver a high quality lending product visually that's in line with the rest of the brand. But once again, to just reaffirm, Swap is on testnet, Lend is on testnet, both are functional. Lend was actually functional before Swap. But in terms of sequencing, having Lend launch first didn't make a lot of sense because Silk needs liquidity for it to really have utility out of the gates. So the sequencing really is ShadeSwap goes live, pools get spun up, we make sure everything's stable on the StableSwap for our test pairs on mainnet, as well as the other assets. And then once those are good to go, once we're comfortable with UI UX, Lend will go out, Silk will go live, pools will be spun up on ShadeSwap shortly afterwards. So overall, we're super stoked. I don't think it's very rare to see a team launch, Bridge December 28th, Dex hopefully before end of January, and then Lend shortly after that. It's a pretty intense to get 3 big products out the door in a 3-month time span. I'm pretty confident that we can get ShadeSwap out before end of January. We're this Wednesday, we're actually doing a sit down to determine the launch date. So it's just going to come down to the comfortability of the developers with respect to that verification process and with the UI. And from there, the date will hopefully be getting solidified. So that's the full transparency on that. I'm still bullish on getting this out before January is done. So, Daltz, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think it's a tough situation of, like you said, the sequencing, because if we particularly thought Lend could go out beforehand, it probably could have been done, right? And Silk probably could have been live a little bit ago. But it's really tough on the economic side of there isn't enough liquidity. There isn't a lot of stability if it's just by itself. Partnering Silk efforts make most sense. That's the tough thing that we've tried in regarding what products come out first, or what products can we come out with before the other ones. And so it's unfortunate a little bit, because I really would have loved for Silk to be out a bit ago. But it does make the most sense, even though it's not the fun thing to do. It makes the most sense to launch these products in the correct order. And so I'm glad that everyone has had the patience to allow us to do things correctly. I know it's not the most fun way. I know it's not the most, I guess, ecstatic way to do things, but it is the right way to do things. And so I'm glad we have the time and we have the ability to do that and to do these things the right way.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like we're gonna prioritize security, verification, and user experience above shoving the product out. So even if we don't get this out before end of January, which is obviously the hope and like the what I'm hoping our target is, like it's coming, it's on testnet, and it's going to be great to finally get these products out to the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Safety.
And I mean, worst comes to worst, we can do a test net release where everyone is allowed to test and report and give feedback, and then we can do a legitimate versioning launch. But that's besides the point. I guess since we kind of covered the update, let's get into a little bit more of the space agenda. So obviously we've discussed that ShadeSwap has the ability to be a normal AMM, a stable swap, and now also a derivative swap. So I guess what enables that, Carter, and how well is that going to work for the derivatives and the stable coins on ShadeSwap?
Yeah, so essentially when we set out to design the stable swap, we had a really unique idea, which was to have asymmetric control over the stable swap curve. And what does this mean? It essentially means like we have granular control over slippage and the relationship between like the two tokens. So as we figured out the math, and Cantor is actually present here, we kind of hit a realization where the reason stable swaps like curve have symmetric curves is because order flow between the two tokens is expected to be symmetrical. As in, if I have USDT on one side and USDC on the other, and they're both pegged to the same thing, generally speaking, you can expect there to be back and forth volume relatively similar, right? You could think of this like in an order book in a similar concept. Like it's a predictable set of buys and sells over the course of time because of the relationship between the two tokens. And so as we design this asymmetric curve, we wanted to use it for Silk, but what we discovered was actually the asymmetric killer use case is not necessarily the stable swap, because that's a symmetrical order flow. The killer use case that no one else in DeFi has ever used this type of curve for is derivatives by a significant margin. And let me explain why that is. So if you have a staking derivative, there's in the current curves, you distribute the liquidity underneath the curve evenly throughout, right? Even with concentrated liquidity, right? It's on both sides of the equilibrium point. You're concentrating liquidity there. The thing with derivatives is that they never trade above peg, or if they do, they don't go very far above peg, because the order flow is that someone would mint out the derivative and immediately sell it on the DEX and earn profit. It's instant money if derivatives are ever over peg. And so then there's this whole part of the DEX curve in AMM where liquidity is completely wasted on providing liquidity for price points that will never ever occur. It will not occur because of the arbitrage. And so derivatives are also unique because they usually there's a risk premium. So if, let's say, the derivatives trading at $1 in terms of what you can mint it at, usually the DEX is holding at a price at something like 97 cents. And this 3-cent gap exists because it represents essentially the time value of money of if you bought the derivative and then waited the 21-day unbonding period to reclaim the underlying L1 token, right? So now we have two really unique factors. We know that for the most part, derivatives are going to have this risk premium where the majority of trading happens in. And on top of that, we know that it's never really going to go above the minting price because of the arbitrage. And this is where the asymmetric stable swap is super interesting, because we can modify the tail on the left side for the prices that are never going to get hit. We can ratchet that up and put almost no liquidity on the left side of the curve on those price points that aren't going to get hit. And because it's an asymmetric curve, this essentially shoves all of the liquidity from the left side into the concentrated region, as well as a little bit on the far right side of the curve. And the net result is, what the math is showing right now, is if you had $1 million in TVL, you could essentially trade 10% of the pool with only 0.13% slippage. So you can make a $100,000 trade in that concentrated liquidity region with only 0.13% slippage on a $1 million TVL pool. That is ridiculous. Like when we were first looking at the math, it was jaw dropping. And the cool part is like we still have that concentrated liquidity in the middle, and it still actually goes slightly above the minting price point. So even if someone makes like a massive buy, right, they're not going to encounter that massive slippage until they get past a certain buy point and they hit that shallow liquidity spot where no liquidity really exists because the trading environment doesn't sit there in like 99.9% of the time. So long and short, ShadeSwap is the most efficient derivative curve I have ever seen in decentralized finance. No one has ever created an asymmetric, like concentrated liquidity curve. And so we essentially stumbled upon hyper capital efficiency for underlying L1 token trades into derivatives and vice versa. And like the super powerful part about this feature is we're essentially going to be having these onboarding pools where it's like, Atom to ST Atom, secret to stake secret, a Juno to ST Juno, right? And we don't even need those pools to be crazy deep, right? Because of how efficient the onboarding and offboarding mechanism is. And then once you get from the L1 token to the derivative, now you're connected to Silk as the primary router, the super deep liquidity. So long and short, derivative swap is going to be crazy powerful. I actually think it's the killer use case of ShadeSwap, and keep your eyes open for more derivatives to come to ShadeSwap.
That's awesome. And so I guess you are correct in the sense that it was a very honest mistake, and we were very focused on stablecoins in regards to like actually creating the curve for stablecoins and not derivatives. And then you find out this other killer use case, like you said, that we can actually use it for both. So if it's going to be that efficient for derivatives, I can only imagine that it won't be as efficient for stablecoins, but it will still be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can essentially set the parameters so that it's a normal, symmetrical stable swap, and there's some nuance there because it's still slightly different than Curve's concentrated liquidity, but it's very very similar, very very similar. So the stable swap is essentially an asymmetric curve where we've set the parameters for it to be a symmetrical stable swap for the most part. There might be some subtle tweaks for the Silk pools to have capital protections for Silk, which there's a lot of nuance there, and it's more of like an edge case. But for the most part, it's going to be very similar to typical stablecoin stable swaps. The only nuance is we kind of needed to still go through the process because we needed a dynamic Oracle. We needed to have a trading environment where it wasn't just dollar stablecoins. Like we can have a stable swap for a dollar stable coin to Silk or a dollar stable coin to the euro, right? There's other stable swaps out there in the Cosmos, which I won't name by names, but recently launched their stable swap, and they're not compatible with two dynamic tokens, right? That are tracking different things but are still stable. So we do have the capability of that on our stable swap, and so we needed to go through that mental exercise to get that implementation in place out of the gates.
I'll name them if you don't want to.
Go for it.
No. But I guess that does lead into my next question of in regards to like opportunities that people have to use different products. Why would someone want to use ShadeSwap over something like Osmosis or Crescent that they both have established stable swaps? I don't think either of them have derivative to derivative pairs. I'm not 100% sure, and even if they do, they won't be able to match the efficiency. So like, why would someone want to use ShadeSwap as a user over something like these other?
So it's a great question. Simply put, people in Cosmos DeFi are going to realize if you're not holding a staking derivative and you're a power user, you are consistently giving up staking yield that you could have earned if you held a derivative while participating in DeFi. And so as DeFi sees this staking derivative renaissance that I believe we're on the verge of in 2023, which I was actually mentioning this in 2022, looking forward to the staking derivative renaissance. I think we're going to see the majority of volume migrate to derivatives. And at the end of the day, those derivative holders are going to go where they can swap between, ST Atom to ST Osmo. They're never really going to hold those underlying L1 tokens, but there'll still be markets for those underlying L1 tokens because that's the safest form of the token. So I think ShadeSwap will become the center point for derivative trading because as we scale up into this world of derivatives and Cosmos, people are going to want the cheapest and most reliable on-ramp and off-ramp for their L1 token. So I want to be able to mint out ST Atom as a whale, but then seamlessly sell, a massive derivative position back for the L1 with minimal slippage and minimal fees. And the curve we have supports that, and no one else in the Cosmos, no one else in DeFi has this specific curve. So I foresee us being differentiated with that specific user story. And then on top of that, because Silk is the centerpiece of the routing pairs, all those liquidity providers are going to love the idea of holding a stablecoin while also holding a derivative on the other side of the pair. So you have your lowest, it's very low impermanence loss-esque scenario, and you're earning staking yield to offset the derivative. So I think Shade is going all in on derivatives before any of their decks in the Cosmos. It's the centerpiece, and Silk's beautifully interwoven into the concept. And it just means a better liquidity provider experience. It means a better user story on slippage and fees. And then it's just going to come down to users starting to migrate to ShadeSwap and more derivative projects wanting to put their liquidity and their incentives on ShadeSwap.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest thing for me is just the efficiency of what you specifically said. Like with the curve that we have and the tests that we've run, with $1 million deep pool, you could make $100,000 trade and accrue 0.1% slippage. That's insane. I also do think that the other thing for me is the partnerships that we've been able to kind of have and generate throughout the Cosmos, and we're able to bring all of those partners to ShadeSwap when the time is right. And so I'm really, really excited for the incentives that are coming and for the partnerships that we've made to make ShadeSwap what it really should be, and that's both on the derivative and stablecoin side.
Yeah, do we want to tease the Silk pairs on this Twitter space?
I was actually going to, my next question for you was going to be to talk about the Silk pairings and what they were going to look like, and kind of the economics behind why Silk is going to be the de facto pair for things on ShadeSwap.
Sure. So this is going to be a first-time alpha leak. So anyone on this Twitter space, this hasn't been on Twitter before. So we're just going to rip through the Silk pairs, shall we? Shall we, Dalton?
We shall.
Silk IST, Silk USDC, Silk USDT, Silk USK, Silk CMST, Silk DAI, Silk Frax, Silk ST Atom, Silk ST Juno, Silk ST Osmo, Silk Staked Secret, and Silk Shade. Those are going to be the primary pairings. And in terms of why, was the question why Silk at the centerpiece, how this benefits the protocol?
Yeah, why I guess in my mind I will use Osmosis as a comparison. Everything is paired to Osmo, correct? So why is ShadeSwap choosing to pair things to Silk instead?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, from a liquidity provider standpoint, you want a minimal amount of impermanence loss with the maximum amount of trading fees and incentives. And so by having a stable asset as the base of liquidity, you're reducing the risk for your liquidity providers. And at the end of the day, this means when there's less risk that a liquidity provider is taking on, this ultimately means that the APR is lower. And when APRs are lower, that's actually a healthy thing for the protocol because it means they're spending less money to attract a corresponding amount of TVL. It's kind of a myth out there, 200% APR, that should be this great thing. It's no, that means you're taking on an insane amount of impermanence loss, and that's how much you need to be paid to justify the capital that you're bringing. So over the long haul, your very strong market makers prefer the kind of stable asset setups and the derivative setups too, because then they're not missing out on the staking yield. And the benefit for this too is people are going to be able to lock up collateral in Shade Lend, mint out Silk, and immediately have access to 20 pools that they can trade that Silk that they just minted out. So by having Silk be the centerpiece of the DEX, Len becomes an insanely powerful use case. Because right now, the other stablecoins out there that have lending products, they all have pretty shallow liquidity. They don't necessarily have a DEX built around their stablecoin. Barring Kajira, I give props to Kajira for following like the DEX plus stablecoin model, but order book liquidity is still very, very shallow versus the strategy that we're kind of going for here. So I think the biggest benefit is it's better for liquidity providers, it's cheaper for the protocol, and it gives more utility for people using Shadelend out of the gates.
Yeah, the whole in-app experience, I don't think people will particularly. We can frame it in our heads, right? Because we've seen it on testnet. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around until you see it on your screen and you go, oh damn, there are 6 products here. I can come in and out of this ecosystem on Shade, no problems. There's a bridge, there's a DEX, there's a lending product. It will be extremely powerful once people truly see the whole application live on their desktop. I will go back to what you said though about APRs being high, because you explained this to me a long time ago and it never truly made sense in my head until I started moving liquidity around, and it finally clicked of high APRs aren't necessarily good. High APRs represent the risk that you have to take on to earn the rewards. And so I always used to think like, oh, high APRs, I'm going to put all my capital in there and earn rewards without any risk. And it isn't that, right? Because the higher the APR, the more risk there is in that pool. And so there are certain parameters that you have to really be locked in on your own head and your own decisions to make sure that you don't have impermanence loss. Or if you are going to have impermanence loss, you have to minimize that as much as you can. And so that was something that didn't ever really make sense in my head. But when you explained it, that in an APR percentage, just the risk assuming that you're on mute.
Well, there's that. Oh, I was going in and out there. But the interesting part is like the only time high APRs are actually very lucrative is when there's essentially a gap between what APR is going to settle at versus what it starts at. So like, in the first 24, 48 hours of some pool's existence, if it's like 250% APR because there's rewards there and no one has like jumped in, that technically can be very lucrative. But once the market kind of determines what the risk reward ratio is, it's pretty fixed at that point in time. And at that point, that's when it really comes down to a calculation of how much volatility is this pair going to have? What's the opportunity cost of being in this pool versus elsewhere? What's the risk of impermanence loss? And fundamentally, our job is to have as many users trading across liquidity providers pairs as possible to give them the fees that justify the risk they're taking on. So that's the sustainable way of supporting liquidity providers is users.
Yeah, most definitely. So I guess just to recap a little bit, we've talked about why ShadeSwap is able to both be a derivative swap, a stable swap, and then thirdly as well, just a normal AMM. We've also discussed why someone would want to use ShadeSwap potentially over competitors and other products that exist in the cosmos. We have also discussed the plans on what pairs will come out once Silk is live. Let's talk a little bit about the incentivization strategy behind current pairs and where we're focusing liquidity and why. In that sense, is it cheaper to put liquidity and incentives on other pairs or specific pairs rather than others?
Yeah, 100%. So I actually have the chart pulled up right now. The current projected emissions schedule, which eventually this will become governance votes, but right now, of course, this is the core community contributors, protocol contributors that kind of come up with distribution. But 61% of LP emissions will be towards stable pairs. 15% roughly will be on Silk to derivative pairs. 10% is projected to be on the shade pairs in essence. And then only 6.56% is on those hyper efficient derivative pairs that we were talking about earlier. So not that much emissions have to be spent to attract a significant amount of capital on those derivative pools because of their capital efficiency and because of their risk profile. So from a liquidity provider's perspective, if you're teeing up to wanting to support Shade Protocol, be sure to prep those stable coins mentioned earlier. I'm super pumped about the derivative to Silk pairs too. I think those ones are going to be super exciting. And for any of you Shade folks that want to earn Shade with Shade, there's still going to be some of those traditional pairs, but the twist is that Shade is either tied to something like ST Atom, Stake Secret, or tied to another Shade product in the form of Silk. So the Silk Shade pair is going to become kind of the liquidity black hole of Shade Swap. That's aiming to be one of the deepest pools.
I think that makes the most sense, right? If it was something else, then why would we be here? But um, yeah, it's interesting to see how much percentage is needed for the type of pairing, because, like you said, like there's only 6% needed on the derivative pairs to kind of give an equilibrium compared to stable coins or shade pairings and things like that. So it's very interesting to see those breakdowns as to how efficient a specific pairing is, and if it's a derivative, if it's a stable coin, or if it's more of a volatile assets like something like Atom or Shade. But I think my last question, Carter, is there anything specifically that you have on your mind that you think is neat about Shade Swap that you would want to discuss? And if not, we will then open it up to community AMA here for the last like 20 to 15 minutes or so. And so if anybody has questions, you can raise your hand and we'll try and answer them as best as we can.
I mean, I won't dive into privacy because I could obviously talk about privacy for an infinite amount of time with these products. I won't talk about Silk and its unique features in its own right as a stablecoin. But what I will talk about is I think it's extremely rare in crypto to have two primitives like swap and lend live side by side, both with beautiful UI UX, and have like such a symbiotic relationship without tokens pulling incentives in different directions. And so what I'm most excited about is when we can start, supporting derivatives on lend, when these LP tokens that liquidity providers are minting out, when they can start locking that up in lend to mint out Silk. Like, the user stories are so cohesive and so strong, and it ultimately is just going to allow people to do more with their capital. We're giving them more options, more optionality, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. So can't wait to get this into the community's hands.
Yeah, I think one of the really best quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't slaughter me if I slaughter this quote, but one of the best quotes that I've read about startups is, if your product saves users time, it's a good product. If your product saves users money, it's a good product. But if your product saves users time and money, it's a great product. And I think we've established the fact that ShadeSwap is more efficient than most everything in the Cosmos currently. So you are saving users money. Now, the time question is a little bit iffy because privacy is unfortunately a little bit more of a cost right now sometimes than it can be a benefit in regards to UX and things like that. I do, however, think once people see this application live, that we have, to the best of our ability in current abilities, solved the UX problem of privacy, and it looks, feels, and functions extremely well, like you said, with user stories and just the flow of the product. And that's chalked up to an extremely large amount of engineering hours and basically every single move you can make, and making sure that it makes sense, and if they do take that move, it leads to something productive. And so I would say, in my own opinion, ShadeSwap also does save you time in regards to every application is on the page. If you want to lend, if you want to mint out Silk, if you want to swap that Silk that you just minted out, it's one click away, right? There's not 4 different applications on 4 different websites that you have to go to. You can mint out a secret I'm going to stumble over my words, a secret staking derivative. You can mint out things like Silk. You can swap into different assets on the DEX. You can put your assets into a bond on the website. Like, all of that is there. And so I do think intrinsically this application does solve users' time. And that's why I feel so great about Shade, because I do think it's a great product that saves everyone both time and money. And I'm very, very excited for people be able to use this very, very soon and get a feel for what DeFi should be.
Yeah, 100%. I think the key user stories we're going to be solving after lend and swap, in my opinion, is what's going to be the cherry on top. Is once we can get essentially a faucet set up on the bridge, so that users who don't have essentially we don't want users to arrive at the website and then not be able to do anything because they don't have secret. So we need to solve that core problem is like really big for us to solve in 2023, and then eventually we want MetaMask user, we want people with as many wallets as possible to have that cohesiveness and compatibility on the website. So once we get the core primitives out, it's just about making those user stories as seamless and easy as possible, because we don't want people to feel the pain of having privacy for the products. We actually want people to come to the site and say, wow, this is like the best UI UX I've ever had, and I'm also getting privacy, and I barely feel the privacy. That's the end state we're pushing towards.
Yeah, I think the two biggest things I'm excited for are the gas problem, and then, like you said, the wallet integration with undeniably the most adopted wallet in probably crypto is MetaMask, like undeniably so. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive in my mind to try and engineer solutions that are different. Then you should probably engineer the solution towards the thing that's the most adopted. So I'm really excited for those two problems that we're looking into to solve for Shade. I think we can probably open it up to community AMA. We got about 15 minutes. So if anybody does have questions, feel free to raise your hand. If you don't know how to raise your hand, you should be able to either click on the bottom taskbar or click on the three dots and be able to raise your hand. If you have a question, please feel free to do so, and we will bring you up and we can have a conversation. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and we will bring you up. Carter, is there anything else that's on your mind, or do you have any questions for me particularly as well while we wait?
When?
Dude. Yeah. Well, like you said, I think our timeline is pretty solid right now, and I do feel really, really good about January. So we will see.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's all it'll. We're gonna launch the products as they're safe and as long as they meet the UI standard, and we still have some verification left. So I'm optimistic, but if it has to get pushed into February in the name of safety, security, UI, all that, it is what it is. But I'm really hoping we can get this sucker out the door. So we shall see.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe Carter, maybe we just did an extremely good job of summarizing why someone should give a damn about ShadeSwap. Nobody seems to have any questions. Looks like Red. What's that?
Oh, we have a requested. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Red, you're on.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Gotcha, yeah. For sure.
Sweet. This has been phenomenal conversation. Super excited for the launch of both ShadeSwap and ShadeLend. This is kind of related to ShadeSwap. Are there any plans right now for the use of the assets that were acquired through Shade bonds that were launched earlier this year?
That's a great question. So answer is yes. Like liquidity is being migrated over to ShadeSwap, like 95% of liquidity. We still actually need to get liquidity on Osmosis bolstered slightly, not an insane amount, but just a little bit. And then there's quite a bit of liquidity on Sienna that will get transferred over, full transparency. And there's also a bunch of STKD-secret that's just sitting there passively generating yield on the DAO that will also probably get turned into liquidity as well. So you can expect some base amount of liquidity from those bonds out of the gates.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Awesome, thanks, Red. Always again asks very, very good questions that are quite well thought through. So I appreciate you being on and listening and asking questions. Let's see if anybody else. I know Ghost says he never has a mic, unfortunately, so he usually can't talk. If anybody doesn't feel comfortable actually using their voice, you are more than welcome to reply the thread to this Twitter space, and we can answer questions that way as well. I can verbally read them to Carter, and we can answer questions like that. If you don't want to quote unquote dox yourself for coming on and speaking, but if anybody has any questions, please do come up. We are more than happy to answer.
I also could pose a counter question to the audience. Has anyone used the Shade Bridge, and if so, what have you thought of it?
That is a good question. I know some people. There we go. Yeah, use actually. Let's do that. If you have used the Shade Bridge and it was a positive reaction, use a positive emoji. And if you had a so-so interaction, then potentially use the thumbs down emoji or the crying emoji. I can scroll through here and see if people have used the bridge. Looks like Opa, Rio has, Reply Goy has. Very cool. Obviously Carter has. I know some people were experiencing some bugs with bridging to Kujira. And so I do know that the team is looking into that as we speak and making sure that that bug is fixed. I did also see somebody had a bug with a unexpected token type 0. So we will also look into that as well. That was in our Discord, but I'm glad that people have had a lot of good interactions, and it looks like Ghost may have a mic. So you're on stage. Welcome.
Oh boy.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, no, I have a mic. It's just usually dead, my earbuds, so I finally charged them. But what's going on, guys? Pleasure to be up here. Really good to listen to the combo today. I'm incredibly excited for everything going on. I did try to use the bridge the other day. I believe I saw something on Twitter about being able to use the bridge for liquid stake tokens through Stride. But I was getting some errors. Is there an issue with ledgers right now, or is there another way to go about it? That was something I ran into, so thanks.
In my understanding, ledgers in work, but ledgers out are having some issues. I was talking with Sis and J Shade, but from my understanding, ledgers in work and ledgers out have some issues. But I know he is currently looking into it, and that is also on our bug list.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can troubleshoot that. I'm able to work with no ledger. It's been seamless. We did make an update on Stride because essentially Stride's IBC transactions are actually free right now, and our front end was designed to detect like, hey, you have 0 of the gas token of the underlying L1, so we're gonna throw an error, which was the wrong behavior tied to the bridge. So we just updated that so that the front end's cool with free transactions from Stride. But I wonder if there's a disparity between that behavior and the ledgers. So if you, I'll chuck you a DM. If you could try it without a ledger sometime, if that works, that'd be good to know, because then we know it's just ledgers. Alternatively, I'll try it with a ledger today too. But thanks for letting us know. We'll see what we can do to fix that.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll actually give that a try right now and let you guys know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on, Ghost. I guess we have about 5 minutes left. So if anybody's just absolutely dying to ask a question, or even if you just want to say that you're stoked for Shade Swap, you're more than welcome to come up and kind of have that conversation, or just let us know. But Carter, any final closing words that you have?
I give a shout out to Secret Austin in the audience. He's been grinding his heart out on front end with Shade Swap. So just big round of applause to all the developers. It's easy to spread and evangelize the story of Shade Protocol. It's much harder to be the ones in the trenches building it. So just want to give a big round of applause for Austin and all the front end developers, contract developers getting these products to the finish line. Really proud of all the work they've done.
I was gonna say, I wonder if people know how many engineers are working on Shade Protocol. Do you have that number, Carter?
It ranges, but I would say a solid 10 to 15 to 20. It depends on which product you're talking about. Somewhere between 10 to 20.
I think on like if we're gonna overall basis, just like all products, I think there's like close to 18. developers working on consecutive products together, which is also another reason why we've been able to, work and collaborate and create 7 products in the span of 12 months. I think you and I were talking about, Carter, where we're going to have 7 or 8 products live in the span of 13 months. And that's just psychotic. No one does that.
It's according to some math I've done, it's roughly 30,000 hours spent building in a single year across the developers.
Good Lord. So yeah, if anybody goes, well, ShadeSwap has been taking way too long. Shade Protocol hasn't launched on time. There's your answer. There's 30,000 hours put in to make sure that this is top of the line shit that you get to use. So if anybody has any doubts, then unfortunately that was the answer. 30,000 hours and 18 people working on all of these applications, and then I think there's 8 that will be out by the time Lend and Swap go live. So once you see the web page, I promise you it will make sense. Once you see that application and you see all of those applications on the left-hand side of your web page, you will understand the benefit to using Shade. But I will get off my soapbox because I'm on it frequently. But
a lot of hours. As for the math on that was essentially 50, we'll say roughly 50 work weeks in a year, multiplied by 40 hours, multiplied by 15 people. So, and there's plenty of people that have worked way more than 40 hours. Yeah. But if you just average 50 weeks, 40 hours, 15 devs, it's roughly 30,000 hours, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good spot to end on. We are extremely excited, guys. We are closer than we've ever been to actually launching these products and getting them out to users to use with liquidity as well. And so I think everyone's just super grateful. We're all in a really good spot. We're all really, really excited and stoked just to, again, get these products out. But if you haven't followed us, make sure to follow us, Shade_protocol on Twitter. Make sure to join the Discord, join the Telegram, make sure to get involved in the community. We're working on some really, really cool, I'll plug my end of the project right now. We're working on a community involved project that will be quite interesting once we get it out. Carter, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that as well.
I think we should hold off on that type of alpha.
I agree. But yeah, it's I think just a culmination of hard work and time and effort. And so, again, we're really excited. This space is recorded as well. So I will, at the end of this, make sure that it's live. And then if you want to share or create a thread as to what we talked about on here, the protocol Twitter will support you. So, again, thanks everyone for joining. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And we will see you soon.
And be sure to join Telegram and Discord. We might get an endpoint set up so people can test out Swap and Lend in advance. So be sure to join the community.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Carter.